Hey, welcome back to the channel. We have a massive story to talk about in this week's video. A BC Supreme Court judge just ruled that title over almost 800 acres in Richmond is up in the air and potentially invalid and actually belongs to the Cowichan First Nations. Now, even if you don't live in Richmond, this ruling could actually impact 95% of land in BC. I've covered a lot of news stories on this channel. This is definitely the biggest. Real quick before we get started though, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hassan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you on your real estate journey. When I'm not making videos like this, I'm helping people just like you buy and sell real estate across the Lower Mainland. So if that sounds interesting to you and you want to chat with me one-on-one, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below or on screen, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video. All right, lots to talk about this week. I hope you had a wonderful week. This one is a doozy. The land titles, the fee simple land titles, which I'll talk about in a second. Those are up in the air for up to 800 acres in the southern portion of Richmond, up by number 7 road. I'm going to pop a map on here so you can see exactly what the boundaries are. But to give this summary of what has been going on, and in fact has been going on for approximately 5 years, apparently Canada's longest court case that not many people knew about. This wasn't something that was out in the public. You didn't see a lot of news articles on it up until the last week, where it's been all over the media. But a BC Supreme Court judge basically said that the fee simple land titles are potentially invalid, that were transferred from the Crown, the government, to private property holders. And so this area of Richmond, a lot of businesses there. You have Amazon Fulfillment Center, you have IKEA, you have private property, you have a couple mega mansions there, you have agricultural farmland. And so basically a gist of it is we had the Cowichan First Nations and other First Nations, which I'll talk about as well, but you had them disputing that land and essentially saying this was our land, and the titles that were given to private property holders from the Crown, set like decades and decades and decades ago, I believe it was early 1900s, that those were invalid, that the Crown didn't have a right to give that land away, essentially. And the judge basically sided with the First Nations, with the Cowichan First Nation, saying, yeah, you know what, you're right. The Crown never had the authority to be giving out these titles to private property owners. So those titles now could be invalid. So I quickly want to talk about fee simple, what exactly that means. We also refer to that as freehold rights to land. It's the largest set of rights that you can have to a piece of property. Think single family home. Most often those are fee simple, meaning that you can do the most amount of things with that land. It's not like owning a stratified property where there are strata bylaws and strata fees and you have, more and more restrictions. It's the least amount of restrictions on land. Now, the way it works in BC though, you never really own land. You only own the rights to land, even at fee simple. So what this ruling is saying is that the Crown, the government, took fee simple title that they didn't have the authority to give out to private property owners in that area. But like I said off the top, 95% of BC is unceded territory that could be challenged. And in fact, even in this case, there are other Indigenous groups that are saying, no, we should have rights to that land. So in fact, there were other Indigenous groups that were defendants in this Supreme Court case, which again sided with the Cowichan First Nations. Now, the Cowichan First Nations, they want the land back because there's a couple things that, come out from this, right? Very often in these sorts of situations, the government may try and, come up with some sort of settlement to say, okay, well, let's figure this out. Maybe, there's some sort of money that, we can work towards, put it, give you some money and we call it a day. But the issue here is that the Cowichan First Nations, they want the land back. And so the provincial government had a couple of things they could do. They could try and negotiate some sort of settlement, which would be a financial settlement, which would come out of our pockets essentially. Or they could appeal. And they just basically a couple days ago said, we are going to appeal this decision. So everything's on hold. If you're a private property owner in these areas, everything's on hold until this appeal process goes through. But, one of the reasons that they couldn't do the settlement, not only that, they wanted the land back, but the other reason is it would open up the massivest can of worms for the provincial government to negotiate a settlement here. And this could transpire across the vast majority of lands across BC. So I want to be clear with the whole fee simple title and the Richmond property owners right now. The judge is not saying we're going to pull your fee simple ownership and we're going to, hand it back to the First Nations. Essentially what they said is, look, those land titles were invalid. Now it's up to the federal government and the provincial government to sit down with the First Nations and work something out. Figure it out at that level. So it's not necessarily that, they're going to take your fee simple title. We will talk a little bit about, what could potentially happen from this and how it could impact BC. But as of right now, nothing really changes until this appeal process shakes out. Now, we do have a lot of land, I would say, across BC, but you'll see it in SFU, you'll see it in UBC, where we have a lot of First Nations owned land, where the structure, the building, and the units are owned by individuals, and we call that leasehold property. Now, I've done videos on leasehold, but in a scenario, so now we're gonna spitball some scenarios. Again, I'm not in a position to say what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. This is way above my threshold. But if we're going to look at it, what could happen here? If this goes to appeal and the appeal court sides with the First Nations, is this a scenario where essentially the federal government and the provincial government have to give the land back? And now, the structures, the property on this land is now on leased land, essentially. There would be a scenario where the federal government and the Crown, the provincial government, would essentially have to pay for the land to the First Nations. And you, as a private property owner, you own your structure. But the problem is when you go from fee simple title, the largest set of rights to land, and you jump over to leasehold title, your property value diminishes, right? You no longer have rights to that land. Whereas with fee simple, you do have certain rights to that land. So this would have a massive impact on property values. Again, we're talking about Richmond right now, but this could scale. This could scale across the province. So, this is why this ruling and this appeal, really nothing else matters in this province when it comes to real estate, when it comes to housing. When we're talking about investment, we're talking about property values, property rights. This is the biggest story that, again, I've had this channel for 5 years. I've been a real estate agent for 10. Definitely the biggest story that I've covered on this channel. And it's going to be the big story as we move forward as well. So it's something for us to watch, but, this appeal is going to have major impact on property rights across Canada, across BC. I don't believe there's, as much unceded territory in coastal regions on the other side of Canada. I think it's predominantly, for the most part, a BC coastal thing. But this is going to have some significant impacts on property rights. And the other thing that I mentioned off the top, a lot of these areas in Richmond, you have the Amazon warehouse, they're industrial, they'll have some commercial. What does this sort of process say to business investment in BC specifically? Like, how comfortable now will people be investing in real estate or property or businesses in these areas, and specifically in BC, right? Because we're already seeing this year in Canada, 3 months of this year, $50 billion left the country in investment dollars, left Canada, much of it going into the US. So we are constantly losing investment money. And so now when you look at growing an economy, when you look at investment into the country, and investment groups are looking at this scenario saying, wow, property rights could potentially be at stake across the province of BC. We may not actually own the property that we own or the set of rights that we own, 95% of us. This is massive. And I mentioned off the top how you didn't hear a lot about this in the news. It really wasn't until obviously we had the ruling that this came out. But, definitely the provincial government, the Crown, the federal government, and the defendants were just hoping that the ruling would go in their favor and this would go away, and it would go away quietly. But now, like I mentioned off the top, this opens up a massive can of worms because, the Cowichan First Nations, they win this ruling, but there's other First Nations that are dueling with them for this land as well. And so every other unceded territory that this sort of conflict arises, there's going to be multiple groups of people laying claim to the land. And I say it's not as easy as just throwing money at the problem. And it's not easy because if you think about it, how many hundreds of billions of dollars are you going to have to fork over as a government, as you and I, are you going to have to fork over to make this right? That's number one. But number two, again, they want the land back so they can have, they can go back to having their cultural ceremonies across the Fraser River. They want it back. They don't want money for it. And so this is what makes it extremely challenging to navigate. Again, it's in an appeal process right now, but don't get me wrong, this has massive ramifications on property rights in BC. So something that I'm going to be covering on this channel as we get more updates to it. But as of right now, again, if you're a Richmond property owner within these boundaries, not much changes for you, as of today. But, perception-wise, if someone's coming to purchase a property and they're seeing this in the news and they're looking within these boundaries and they know that this is up in the air, the property becomes inherently more unsellable, tougher to sell. Value has basically already diminished just by having, these sort of articles, this sort of news, this in the media, that this is all kind of up in the air. Right? When things are in question, when things aren't stable, that affects property values. And so, if you're a property owner in BC, like myself, you got to hope that we're successful on this appeal, because this is going to have, massive implications to your property value, to property rights in this province. So I'm definitely going to be doing updates on this as we get more information. Right now, it's pretty fresh and new. We don't have a lot, but as I learn more, I will do update videos. So follow along if you want to see those videos in the future. And again, if you're in the Vancouver area, you want to chat about real estate with me, you can book me for a free call, or you can just give me a call, send me a text, shoot me an email, whatever you like. My contact info is below in the subject line. But I want to thank you for watching this week's video, and I look forward to seeing you next week.